Last Minute Blues Podcast with Donnie, Alex, Jeremy, and Jeff Burton.
It is the Last Minute Blues Podcast. Donnie Fandango, joined in studio by Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic and Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN. We have lots of Blues stuff to talk about. We have a limited time in which to do it because Jeremy has got an interview.
Blame it on Jeremy.
With Craig Berube that he's got to do today.
Oh, you got the music in your body today, don't you?
I'm
singing, JR singing.
I'm feeling it today, I think, a little bit. Guys, I hate to start the podcast out with bad news, with me getting pissy.
Oh, okay.
But we gotta. So this past Saturday, I had to get up at 5:30 to take 5:30 a.m. because Ava had to be at school for a band competition by 6 a.m.
Oh, I'd be pissy too.
All right. So that's okay. That part wasn't the issue. So we get Ava square, I get her to school, get back home, and man, oh man, I cuddle right back up next to Mary. I'm warm underneath the covers. You know, we got the windows
Can you tell
open.
us the rest of the story? I was going to say, this is a podcast, though, so I guess we're good.
8:07, after I'd been back asleep for maybe an hour and a half or so.
Here we go.
The neighbor behind me kicks in with the yard work.
Oh.
And that son of a bitch was doing yard work for 4 friggin' hours, and I know that his goddamn yard is not big enough for 4 friggin' hours worth of goddamn yard work. So I've got this guy who had went, I would say probably over a year without doing this nonsense to doing it again. And I've seen this guy. I can tell that this guy is not a jerk. And by me thinking that he's a jerk, I'm the jerk. But I don't know what I'm going to do because I'm a light sleeper and I friggin' cannot stand it and I can't sleep with my window open.
I would just give your address out on the air here and people will go over there and take care of it.
Or Slash's lawnmower tires.
If you saw this guy, though, I feel guilty even thinking that. Yeah. He just looks like a nice dude that probably wanted to mow his lawn at 8:15.
Just close your eyes when you do it then, so then you don't see him. You know, you just take the action out on what he's doing.
I got to have a party.
I don't start mine until like 12 o'clock. I'm that dude that's anal about the grass to where if it's slightly wet, I won't cut it.
Dude, I thought the rule was 10 o'clock. I thought sort of the general, commonly accepted neighborhood sort of rule was 10 a.m. on the weekends. Maybe even 9 o'clock, okay?
That was before I had kids. And then the rule is, hey, when can I actually get the grass cut? If I got to cut it at 7 a.m., I'm cutting it at 7 a.m.
I'm going to text my wife and ask her what time she cuts it. I don't know what time she...
Jared hasn't cut the grass since he was 13 years old. That's a lucky son of a gun right there.
I just want to like my neighbors. And
no. Oh, I don't like mine, but that's okay. I just keep to yourself.
I'm surrounded by ones that I like. The next door neighbor, not the guy behind me, the next door neighbor, I'm not lying when I say this, he hates me. Hates. He hates me. I mowed, I believe, like a foot over into his yard. I don't even think it was a foot. And so he put this marker in the side yard so that I won't mow in. Dude,
that's a jerk move.
Let me tell you another one about this guy. So we live near a park, and this park has lots of geese and ducks and things. All right. One time, one of the geese got loose and was walking towards Tesson Ferry. Now, let me tell you something. A goose on Tesson Ferry, not a great thing for anybody. My daughter and I are trying to get this goose back into our neighborhood because the neighborhood ends up at the park, all right? Mm-hmm. The lake. So we're trying to shoo this goose. Shoo. He's in his yard. I hear him go, "Shut up!"
Oh my nice. You should have sicked that homicidal bird on him. I don't shoo geese away from because they're psychotic.
Yeah, I know. I just didn't want to see it get run over on Tesson Ferry. But anyway, other than that,
I've seen a lot of worse things on Tesson Ferry, though.
Yeah, well, that's true. Unfortunately, that's true. So, Blues are in action. Were in action last night. They begin a road trip tomorrow in Toronto. What I did not know, realizing and going into that game last night, was how dominant the Jets had been over the Blues. I really had no idea of that.
Yeah, what was it? It was one win in their previous 11 games that they had, and that one win was a shutout that Joel Hofer posted. Like they had not won back-to-back games against Winnipeg since 2019. Last year they were swept, and then the previous 2 seasons it was one win, and then that was it.
I mean, that's fine, well and good, and obviously it's not great, but I mean, it's not doing the Jets a whole lot of good in the end.
Well,
I mean,
that's because they played Connor Hellebuck 80 games in the regular season, and they're like, hey, we're going to be great. And then they get to the postseason, it's like, oh, our goaltender's a little fatigued.
Well, but it seems like then what's going to be the different story for that team this year? Because obviously they're undefeated. They've started very strong. But, I mean, I don't know that I hear anybody, like, waving the Winnipeg Jets flag to be even maybe a finalist in the Western Conference.
No, they're just one of those hard teams. They've been hard, especially for the Blues. They're always tough games, right? Mm-hmm. And they've been fairly close games. I know the Jets have, handed it to the Blues in a few of those. Close. But in terms of big picture, I don't think there's anything sexy about them. I don't think people would be surprised if you found them in the quarterfinals and making some hay, but I think that big picture, it's not a team that you say, yeah, that's a Stanley Cup.
Well, and last night's game felt so different than the other handful of games that the Blues have played, at least recently, against the Jets, because those other games, I think they were outscored 8-2 in the previous 4 games in the first period against Winnipeg. Like, Winnipeg has put it on the Blues in the first. You led in the first period after that one, and I thought the Blues kind of played toe-to-toe with them, with the exception of a 10-minute stretch there in the second period. So they've got the best goaltender in the league, and I can say that confidently. I mean, Connor Hellebuck, every single season in the regular season, is just this guy, and they've got dudes who capitalize on scoring chances like Kyle Connor did last night. So they're a fun team, but they're always a team that I look at and I say, cool, but I don't trust you in the postseason. They're like the Toronto Maple Leafs. I can see the Maple Leafs have Austin Matthews score 60 goals. I could see them have 3 guys with 100 points, and I look at them and I say, yeah, but I don't trust you in the postseason.
So watching the game last night, I kind of thought a bit of the way that you did. Obviously, I was not stoked that they lost, not stoked that they got behind again, but I didn't feel, I felt like they played all right for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting next to JR for that second period, and the first period, they were the better team. It was easy. I mean, I think high danger scoring chances were like 7-2 at even strength. Like, they kept pushing Winnipeg in their zone. They were heavy on the forecheck. Second period started off fine, but then you took back-to-back penalties, and that's playing with fire with Winnipeg. And then the moment they scored that second power play goal, you just could tell that there was life breathed into Winnipeg. And then from there, JR and I were both referencing it. It just felt like Winnipeg just kept pushing the Blues back on the blue line. Like, the Blues, Bannister's phrasing of it was played on their heels a little bit, to where Winnipeg came in, Blues were like, sure, go ahead. And then finally they take a shot, and you're thinking, whoa, where'd that come from? They just weren't as aggressive in the second period, in that 10-minute stretch that they were in the first period. They got back to it in the third. I mean, you were inches away from Schenn putting that goal in the net with the goaltender pulled. Yeah. He was on the doorstep with that bouncing puck. I was actually pretty pleased with how they played against Winnipeg. Now, should have gotten a point out of that. You can't let 3 goals go in 10 minutes, but I thought they actually performed pretty decent against Winnipeg.
Yeah, I just need some more, big picture, need some more zone time, and they're not getting the zone time, Donnie, because they're not getting the puck across the blue line clean. The zone entries have been tough, especially when they lost Robert Thomas. Granted, I know it was the third period last night, but not only 5-on-5, on the power play too, it's been tough to get the puck in the zone and get something established. Power play 0 for 10 since the Vegas game now. Yeah. So need some more offense. But, yeah, you liked what you saw in pieces last night, especially in the first period, like Alex said. But not enough. There's just been these periods in each of these, even the games they won, that they're just not getting it done. And, I don't want to give them any excuses. I think we're past the part now where you're talking about getting to know each other. I mean, when you're deep into the season. But, they have some players in some positions that, Bolduc struggled a little bit, and he's a guy I've been a big fan of, and they've had to move him down in the third period. So now you got a different guy, Texier, last night playing, top 6 to try to get what you want from him there in late in the game. And so I think they're just still trying to figure things out, and they're not executing.
So, and we don't know anything about Robert Thomas at this particular time.
Not yet. We'll find out hopefully at practice here in just a bit. Not sure when the pot will
concerning that they said x-rays, though,
yeah,
right? Yeah. Like, when you bring up, because Joey was talking about this on postgame, and Joey obviously has been through the ringer more than any of us have, but he said typically when you see a guy get up quickly after he blocks a shot, and then he looks like he's fine, and then he leaves, he's like, those are the ones that are scary, because Joey's just said in the past that, like, with breaks, it doesn't feel that way until you try and put some weight on it, and then it's like, uh-oh. Whereas the stingers, those are the ones that you think it's bad. They lay there for 10, 15 seconds, and then they're able to shake that one off. I was hopeful because I didn't think it hit as low as it did on Thomas originally. I thought it was more like around the calf, but after watching the replay a couple of times, it did look like it was a little bit lower. But when Bannister said, we're waiting for the x-rays to come back, that's the part that's like, oh, no.
And guys, they'd be in a world of hurt. Like this is a team. You already have Buchnevich playing center, and a lot of people are scratching their head at that one. And then you have to move Shen down to third line center, so he'd obviously come up if Thomas misses any time. I feel bad for Thomas. Your next game, you're going home to play in Toronto.
Oh,
He's pretty excited about this one, and we'll find out more. Maybe it's nothing. Again, I don't know when the pod gets released here this afternoon, but we should have an update at practice.
Is Robert Thomas the player the Blues can least likely afford to lose outside of Jordan Bennington?
I would put him above Jordan Bennington.
Oh, you put him above Jordan Bennington
Last season, I would have said Jordan Bennington's number one. This season, the way that Joel Hofer's played, I don't know if I could put Bennington in there because at least you've got a guy you trust. I would put it as Robert Thomas's number one with Colton Parayko being number two.
Yeah, I think you're right with Thomas number one for sure, and definitely that's because the way Hofer's playing. Like if you had to run with Hofer for a couple weeks, you
could handle it. A whole season would be a little bit of a different story.
Yeah, you miss Bennington, but Hofer can handle it. Defensively, I think Parayko's got to be 1-2 on that list. Now people are going to disagree with that with the way that top pair has played this year. I get it. Maybe some people, Alex, are going to say it's Broberg or
the god that is Philip Broberg, and the Swedish legend himself.
He's a guy, but I think even if you missed him for a week or two, you'd figure it out. But you're talking, even though Robert Thomas hasn't produced much offensively this year in terms of, I know he's got a few points.
I was going to say, he's a point. It's wild that you say that because I felt the same way last night where I'm like, Thomas really hasn't been producing in the early portion of the season. He's a point per game player.
And I did see that point per game the other day, and I'm driving down the road. I'm like, he's a point per game, but you don't feel like he's doing it. And it's just because there's nothing, it doesn't look like much. It's just happening point-wise. But if you lose him and now you got to shuffle the deck with the center, so on and so forth, that would be, to me, he's number one.
And you know what? We have had, if just off the top of my head, I feel as though that we have had really great luck with injuries over the course of the last year. So
he's trying to jinx it.
Come on, Don.
Well, I'm not trying to jinx it. The guys are.
Cracker.
Damn it.
There's no wood in here.
There are times in which that I say something and then halfway out of my mouth I go, gosh dang it, I wish I could take that.
Oh, that's my 10-year relationship with my wife.
Okay, so is it crazy for me to watch these Blues and I'm in a kind of a weirdo spot because I didn't get mad after the game last night. I feel like there's room to grow, but I'm also watching them going, I don't think that they are that much different of a team than Winnipeg. I don't think that the difference is all that great. Am I crazy?
I wouldn't say you're crazy because from last year to this year, I have felt like this is a different team. And I was generally pleased with how they played because of the changes they made from the start of the homestand to the end of the homestand. And what I mean by that is that Minnesota Wild game, afterwards, Bannister was frustrated. And he was like, look, we play too much perimeter hockey. Even Steve Ott was like, we had no terrestrial zone time. We just played around the perimeter, and it was it. And then you just carry that through the rest of the homestand. Look at how they played against the Winnipeg Jets last night. They did the same thing against the Carolina Hurricanes. You got to the net front presence. Defensively, this has been a pretty sound team. There's never been an explosion of offense that we've seen other than a couple of 5-10 minute spans that have fallen apart. The difference between Winnipeg and St. Louis, one is special teams. Winnipeg is clipping close to a 50%, and as JR mentioned, you're 0 since that Vegas series, and your penalty kills at 50% right now since that Vegas series. But two, you don't have guys that can do what Kyle Connor did last night. You don't have a guy like a sharpshooter who can come into the zone from the outside of the faceoff circle and just wrist a shot and nobody stopping it. That's what you're lacking. You're lacking that sniper that is always a threat when the puck's on his stick.
Yeah, and this is a team that could be top 3 in the Central. They were last year. They're definitely a couple notches ahead of the Blues. And to me, whenever we have this conversation, I go back to the point that this is who the Blues are right now. You could look to several different plays last night and point to, okay, that happened because they have this player, and they're just not that far along yet where you can say they have the guys who they think are going to make them a competitive team. This is a group of players who, I think can be good on certain nights. We've seen it.
Yeah.
Like we saw it the past couple of games with Carolina and the Islanders. But I think that it's a situation where, upgrades are going to be needed. When you look out there, and this is no disrespect to Ryan Suter, and say, holy smokes, he's actually playing pretty well. We're talking about 40-year-old Ryan Suter playing in the top pair. If that doesn't smell retool, then I don't know. Right. I don't know what is. So I think there's places and times where they're going to look great, and I think there's times where we're going to get reminded of the situation that they're in.
Yeah, because at the end of it, and we were talking about this in the broadcast booth during postgame. You look at it, you're not supposed to be where Winnipeg is. Winnipeg is in Stanley Cup window territory.
Yeah.
Last year, you were in the midst of, a 3-year plan before you were even close to that conversation. So you're not supposed to be there with them. But the fact that you played that team fairly well, and the part for me where I look at and say, this has been a better start to the season than I would have imagined, you've beaten the bad teams. Last year, you didn't beat the bad teams. You picked up points against Seattle, against San Jose. You picked them up against the New York Islanders. You found a way to get 2 points from the Carolina Hurricanes. You've beaten the teams you were supposed to beat. Last year, that was not the case.
All right, so want to ask a couple of things. First of all, Nick Leddy and that injury. What are we thinking there? Do we think he's going to be out for a while? What?
Yeah, so Drew Bannister said a couple times that lower body injury, he's going to be off the ice for a little bit. His comment was that, when you do see him on the ice again, it's not going to be long before he's back playing games again. I don't know what the injury is. I'm always up front when I don't know what the injury is. However, when Drew Bannister was talking about a couple of Blues injuries, he talked about, early in the season there's groin issues, things with skating and guys getting back on the ice. So I'm not saying that's his injury. That's just what was connected to, the conversation. So, I don't know if it's going to be another week for Nick Leddy, but if people see that he goes on IR, which is 7 days, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be another week because it's retroactive. They could play him,
It's Thursday, I think.
Thursday,
tomorrow he could come off.
Tomorrow night.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Yeah. Well, and the thing, too, with, you got the luxury. The defense has played well without Leddy. And so you've got the luxury to look at Nick Leddy and be like, hey, you're not 100%, be at 100%.
Right.
He's doing the same thing with Toropchenko. He told him, be 100% when you come back. That's the luxury of the early portion of the season. And to your point, you haven't been rashed with injuries early on so that you can have that where you tell people to take their time.
Big congratulations to Jake Neighbours, getting the bridge deal and keeping Stan Bowman's greedy mitts off of Next Generation Blues captain.
We all thought the same thing when that happened. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone was thinking, suck at Edmonton.
Right.
Yeah.
No, Stan.
Yeah.
Not going to take this
Sorry.
one from us.
Can't have this one.
It goes without saying, and, man, we've all been just crazy about this guy since he got here. I mean, this is a guy that's going to be a Blue for a long time, going to probably wear a letter at some point or the other as well. He just looks like he's got that in him.
And Donnie, speaking of letters, I had a friend who lives at the Ozarks, and he wanted a Jake Neighbours jersey. So I said, yeah, I'm coming to the Ozarks in a couple months. I'll run by Enterprise Center and grab you a jersey. Well, guess what? They didn't have any. So the nice gentleman down at the Blue Note Authentics, he said, here, let's put one together. And
it's like Build-A-Bear for Blues jerseys.
He literally went through the store. Oh, here's an N. Oh, way. Here's an E. Here's an I. And 20 minutes later, he's hitting the press down and putting this thing on. And it was kind of cool. I text Jake. Normally don't do that in these types of situations, but I said, hey, pretty cool. They're out of your jersey. I had to have one literally made right in front of me. He goes, wow, fans in St. Louis are pretty awesome.
Now, the better part to end that story would have been he forgot the U and spelled the name wrong. And my buddy got it and he was like, what the hell is this?
What do you think the ceiling is for Jake Neighbours? Realistically, what do you think the ceiling is?
Well, I think when he scores 27 goals, everybody gets caught up in the, 30 goals, can he do 35, that type of thing. But Doug Armstrong, I think, said it best yesterday at the press conferences. He just does so many things right. And that's why they wanted to get him signed to this contract because, admittedly, when you talk to these guys, they admit that, hey, when your contract situation is up and, he's got 1 year left on the deal, someone will tell you it's tough to go into those hard areas and play that type of game when your head can get taken off. And then, now what's your contract situation? So, not that they sensed that from Jake Neighbours early this season, but Doug said, we wanted to take that pressure off him. Hey, go play your game, do these things, do the things that made you successful last year, and here's the money. Here's $3.75 for the next 2 years. So as far as a ceiling, I don't know that he'll be if you look back at his hockey card in 15 years and you're going to see 10, 30-goal seasons, but you're going to talk to people who say, this guy did everything right. Put teammates in good position, stood up for teammates, scored some goals, made some great plays. I just love watching him play.
Yeah, I loved Army's comment yesterday during the press conference when he was talking about being at the Dallas Hall of Fame ceremony and Brett Hall was talking about Brendan Morrow.
Yeah, I heard this. Yeah.
He called him a foxhole guy. And Army was like, man, that's Jake Neighbours. That's exactly what he is. I mean, Jaden Schwartz was this way too, to where it's like he always put his team in a good position, always came out of the corners with the puck on his stick, was always in front of the net. I mean, Jake Neighbours is as much as I'd love to see it, Neighbours is not going to be a Zach Hyman and put up 50 goals in a season, but Jake Neighbours is going to be a part of successful and winning teams because of how he plays. And it's not just his net front presence or his ability to forecheck, but it's his pissed off attitude post whistles if somebody gets too close to his teammates. And we went for the longest time looking at the Blues post whistle and being like,
Anybody.
Nobody. Like,
Right.
everybody would just skate away. And now you see Jake Neighbours just throwing the stinky mitt in somebody's face just because. Those are the types of guys that you have to have on your team. That's the rally starter for a squad.
And I also think that Doug Armstrong does not make that comparison lightly. Like, he doesn't just throw that out to throw that out. I think he realizes the comparison and how friggin' big of a deal that is. I don't think he just haphazardly threw that out there.
I mean, look at Morrow. If I'm not mistaken, Morrow wore the C for Dallas, and he was a part of, I think I looked at it last night, he was a part of 7 of the first 8 playoff runs when he was a member of the Dallas Stars. So when he started with Dallas, he was a part of the playoffs in 7 of the 8 years. Now, granted, you had the Mike Modanos and the Sergei Zubovs and the Brett Halls, but, I mean, you don't go to that many playoffs unless you have the right types of guys. And Morrow was a guy that was playing second-line minutes by the third year he was in the league.
Yeah, and let's give Jake Neighbours some credit here, too. Talking to him, he wants to be here for sure.
Totally.
But he said, I think Doug said that the contract negotiations, quote-unquote negotiations, lasted about a week. Hey, Jake, you want to be here for a couple of years? Yep, for sure. Hey, here's the money. Yep, sounds good. We'll do it. Okay, 8:30, Doug, here comes the press release. So, this wasn't anything where like, no, I want 8 years.
Yeah.
Right.
No, here, give me 2 years. I'll prove it to you.
Nice when it can come together rather easily.
Said he wanted to be a part of the team when they get to the playoffs.
I know we don't have a ton of time, guys, but I want to ask about a couple of random things. First of all, the play of the Joseph brothers, as you see it. It seems as though that they have done a really great job since they've gotten here of not only kind of being part of the team. I see them in videos and things like that, messing around with their teammates, but also it feels as though that they are making a good impression on the ice for the Blues as well.
I think so, Alex and Donnie. I think that especially Matthew. I love this third line. Now, if you talk about Matthew Joseph, Braden Shen, and Dylan Holloway, that's a great third line on any team in the NHL. I'm telling you, like if you're getting the production out of your top 6, I think it's a great third line. And P.O. Joseph has come in and leapfrogged Scott Perinovich, and nothing flashy, but gets the job done.
I like P.O. Joseph because he's big and he just puts pucks on net, and I think that's what they were lacking from Scott Perinovich. You heard him talk about it all the time. We want Scott to shoot more. We want him to shoot more. P.O. Joseph does not hesitate to shoot the puck, which I think is great. Matthew Joseph, though, is the one that stands out to me the most. And, I mean, his brother's the same way, but the personality that those guys bring, they're always ready to joke around. They're always looking to have a good time. This past Saturday, I was in the locker room, and just having a conversation with Matthew Joseph, he sits right next to Dylan Holloway and Jake Neighbours, and you see him laughing nonstop. But even an interview that Grant Francis did with yesterday for our broadcast, like he dropped the F-bomb 4 times in it just because he's talking about how fun this team is.
Yeah.
You see he and his brother are trending on Twitter for their Halloween costumes that they did together. Those are the types of guys that the Blues haven't had since the Pat Maroons, the Ryan Reeves, the Tyler Bozaks. Even Oscar Sundqvist was this way in the early portion of his time here in St. Louis. You've got to have guys, and P.O. actually said it best, you've got to have guys that when the ish hits the fan in the middle of the season, guys that can keep it light and that guys that you want to come talk to. Because he joked, he said, everybody's got their wives, their kids to go home to, but sometimes that's not who can help you through the hockey season. He's like, the teammate can, and that's what those guys bring.
I always get too excited. But it just feels like there is something growing and building here with this team. I know they're not there. I know we got a ways to go. I know it's a super easy thing to say, but it genuinely, again, 2 weeks into the season, 3 weeks into the season, seems like these guys really like going to battle for each other, really like playing together.
Yeah, no, I think that's accurate. And Alex, you've been down there. Like, I think the vibe is good.
Oh, yeah.
And that's all you can really ask for. And I can't say that the vibe's been great in the past
Last
2
2
years.
years, it's been quiet the time you walk in there.
Yeah, I'll give you an example here. Is The Athletic wants us to do a story where we kind of go around the room and talk to guys about being in that locker stall and the guy next to you and talking about him and what that's like.
Yeah.
Every day sitting next to that guy and tell me some funny stories where I can write a big story about the Blues locker room, and I did not do it last year just because I knew the piece wouldn't turn out very well.
Yeah.
Like, you just didn't feel that personality. And Matthew Joseph, I think the Blues put out on social media, he's spraying Neighbours with some water, getting the contract and things. So I think those two guys are good for the room. And I think the Blues recognize that. I really do. They recognize that this locker room needed some guys in there who were a little more uplifting and had some personality, and they've brought a few in.
The thing, too, is, like, hockey's at the point now where you can't just have good locker room guys. Like, they don't impact the team the same way. I think the reason Matthew Joseph is on the minds of every Blues fan is it's not just how he is off the ice, it's the way he plays on the ice. That line, like JR mentioned, that's been one of their best lines over this last homestand. They play north, they forecheck, they're fast. Matthew Joseph's got a little pissed off attitude in him as well, and they're scoring goals. So, like, it's one thing to be a great locker room guy. It's another thing to back it up and actually perform where you're seeing the contributions in games.
Absolutely. And also, too, I'll wind up with this. The interview that Andy Strickland did during the game with the Joseph's parents was, without question, one of the cutest things that I have ever seen in my entire life. They seem to be amazing people, and they send them messages before the game. Hey, have a great game, good luck tonight, that sort of thing. I'm just like, I love all of you people so freaking much, so much. All right, well, listen, we got to wrap it up.
I'm going to give Donnie Jake Neighbours' cell phone number so he can text him before the game.
So we can start texting him.
Have a good game.
Have a great game, man. We love you.
Dude, he will never speak to you ever again. Ever, ever, ever. All right, well, guys, we got to wrap this up so somebody can talk to Coach Barrett.
Big time over here.
Got any questions you want me to ask him?
I just want you to tell him I said hi.
All right.
Donnie said hi, and then give Donnie Craig's number.
All right, listen, check out everything that Jeremy's got going on The Athletic, Blues coverage aplenty, Alex and 101 ESPN, all kinds of stuff there as well. We thank you so much for listening to the Last Minute Blues podcast. For our homeboy Jeff Burton, I'm Donnie Fandango. As always, let's go Blues.
The Last Minute Blues podcast. Hear more at 1057thepoint.com.